Good afternoon, everyone. We now have quorum. We have trustees King and Williams online. We have trustee McLean and myself in the room. So we're going to proceed. If you can, please stand up for acknowledgement of traditional lands. We acknowledge we're hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm just going back to, I don't have an agenda in front of me, so give me 1 second. I've got to go to eScribe. Okay, can I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda?
Trustee Williams.
Thank you, Trustee Williams, seconded by Trustee McLean. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Hearing and seeing none. Are there any delegations? No delegations. Okay, so we have 2 items on the agenda. We have the analysis of trustee survey responses, and I understand that Mr. Plotnikoff will do a PowerPoint to walk us through, and then we'll get into our discussions about board bylaws. So without further ado, Mr. Plotnikoff, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So we are uploading the PowerPoint presentation. And we will talk first about the trustee survey and analysis of that. Thank you very much. So the survey was offered to trustees in March, April 2025. There were approximately 20 questions. We can move to the next slide. Yes, thank you. And the response rate was about 40%. So the first question, next slide. Thank you. The first question was with regard to temporarily suspending provision of the bylaws. And the question was, should committees be able to suspend provisions of the bylaws? And if you look at this split, roughly half of the respondents indicated answer no, 2 yes, 1 yes, but higher threshold should be applied, and 1 unsure. We move to the next slide, please. Should specific reference to Indigenous student trustee be added to the bylaws? It's section 2.5. We have 4 yeses, 3 no, and 1 indicated that we should consult with the student trustees on that question. Election of board and committee chair and vice chair, section 348. Thank you. So the absolute majority agreed with the closed ballot as a default, and we had discussion on this item at this committee as well. So I think it's consistent with the discussions of the bylaws review subcommittee. The next slide is Planning and Priorities Committee, section 451. Should there be clarification that PPC, Planning and Priorities Committee, is not a committee of the whole? And there is a connection to in-person attendance policy and the legislation that will come into effect. The policy will come into effect on September 1st. What should the size of the committee be? And a couple of responses. Mandatory attendance twice monthly is reasonable. That was 1 comment. If PPC is a standing committee, there is no in-person requirement. That's another comment. Should portions of the PPC mandate be shifted to other committees? And the suggestion is to shift annual information reports to quarterly information sessions. So if we move to the next slide, please. FBAC mandate, section 473. What updates are needed regarding FBAC mandate? Suggestions included TLC, Toronto Land Corporation approvals should be shifted into FBAC. Program content to be shifted into PSCC. And suggestion to kind of identify one committee for facility matters. Next slide, please. CAC mandates, section 411. Is clarification needed regarding CAC mandates? Majority indicated yes, clarification is needed regarding, and there were several comments, consultation framework, I guess consultation with CACs, and perhaps both by CACs with their members, access to staff, involvement in operations or operational decisions at the board, trustee participation at CACs, and suggestion that role and mandates of CACs should be periodically clarified and reminded to everyone. If we move to the next slide, please. Meeting management, section 534. Any updates required to the chair's ability to require an individual to leave the meeting if they engage in negative, critical, or derogatory conduct? So suggestions need definitions of those terms. Suggestion to allow chair's decision to be appealed. Option to cut microphones. Suggestion that professional learning required for chairs how to enforce those rules. And there was one suggestion that the chair should not have this authority to remove people from the meeting. Next slide, please. Emergency business, section 512.9. Any proposed changes to emergency business provisions? And majority prefer status quo. And other comments included proposal to have majority vote instead of 2/3 majority, just a simple majority. And another change criteria to allow for advance notice and due process. So it would be emergency business, but some advance notice is recommended or suggested. If we could move to the next slide. It's with regard to consent agenda, section 512.12. And the comments are as such: allow for consent agendas for all committees, increase requirement to lift items from the consent agenda to 1/3. Notice of lifted items is very helpful. That's the comment. Online ballot platform to vote on items to lift the items from consent agenda, so the process becomes more automated. That's the suggestion. I understand that currently it's done via emails. And then staff should identify 1-2 agenda items related to student achievement, well-being, and or community interest to remove from consent agenda to ensure the public is informed. So it sounds like a suggestion to have some certain items that would not be on consent agenda. If we move to the next slide, please. Unlimited speaking at committee, section 513.12. Should there be a cap on the number of times a trustee is able to speak? Should the chair have authority to manage speaking under certain circumstances, repetitive, abusive, etc.? So general support for certain caps an authority for the chair. Suggestion to define those repetitive abusive questioning. Some of the suggestions limit to 2 or 3 times in terms of speaking times, and shorten from 5 to 3 minutes the length of speaking. Provide speaking authority to committee. Provide speaking priority. Priority to committee members. We could move to the next slide, please. Ending debate at committee meetings, section 513.17. Should ending debate calling the question motion be limited to a member who has not yet spoken? So on this one, there was no consensus, and kind of connection to the discussion about capped speaking time. So depending on that decision, the kind of recommendation regarding calling the question would be more clear. Some, though, supported status quo if speaking time is limited. Next slide, please. This is with regard to minority report, section 514.13. So the question was whether these provisions in the bylaws are clear, any changes required or not. So majority agreed that the provisions are clear. Some suggested that still additional clarification would be useful. Recommendation for chair to remind trustees if a minority report should be moved at the end of the vote. That the recommendation, I guess, when the vote takes place. Next slide, please. This is with regard to motions with budget implications, section 515.14. All motions that require budget for a new initiative will be considered by FBAC or PPC before it is considered at board. Is there a more efficient way to address motions that may arise at other committees? So some comments, some thoughts. Consider at committee of the whole before board. Consider those motions. Recommendation to define those new. Is there a financial threshold for referral? Any scenarios that don't require referral, i.e. board resolutions that are updated to existing programs? Then another one, staff should determine an appropriate agenda. And finally, committees should send consolidated budget requests to FBAC to be considered together in one meeting during the budget process. So these are some comments, some suggestions through the survey. Next slide, please. Meeting end times, section 515.24. Should there be an early end time? So general agreement to have earlier, but no consensus earlier time, but no consensus on specifics. Recognition that earlier meeting start times may be difficult for some trustees to attend in person, and connections made to capping delegations, which would shorten the overall meeting time. So depending on other discussion points, the meeting time is generally, earlier meeting time is generally supported, but the exact time would depend on those decisions. If we could move to the next one, please. This is with regard to reconsideration, section 515.25. Bylaws require a 2/3 majority to reconsider decision within 12 months period. Should this remain status quo? Majority agree with the status quo. There was one recommendation to change the term from 12 months to 6 months. Next slide, please. This is with regard to notice of motion, section 5:1545. Should there be a requirement for a fresh notice of motion if the original draft motion was changed in a meaningful way? So majority support that. And there is a recommendation to define term meaningful. And you can see on the pie chart the distribution of responses. Next one is delegations, section 5:16(1). So suggestions for consideration. Overall time limit for delegations and management of large number of submissions should be addressed. Cap the total number, suggestions total 10 delegations, and limit speaking time. For example, 3 minutes were suggested instead of current 5. Some are happy with the current status. Then suggestion to require delegates to submit in advance written delegation and stick to their submission. Another one, manage or completely restrict questions of clarification. We have, I believe, 3 minutes per trustee for clarification questions currently. Use special meetings or bi-monthly meetings to hear from public when needed. That's another suggestion. And next slide, please. We kind of listed other items based on the responses that could be considered at this committee or discussed. One, no schedules for private sessions of board, be called as needed and become special board meetings. That's the suggestion. Allow for 6 p.m. start time for board meetings. That was one recommendation. Another one was with regard to section 211 in the bylaws. And that's the language about responsibility toward constituents versus responsibility to board as a whole under the Education Act, and the suggestion to align the language with the Education Act. Under 3, require mandatory trustee participation on at least one community advisory committee. 4, suggestion for mechanism to review monthly by governance, to review motions by governance staff for consistency adherence to policies and previous board resolutions before publication. Next slide, please. Number 5, suggestions kind of with regard to discussion needed on size, mandate, meeting attendance, clarification needed for PPC, Planning and Priorities Committee. That was mentioned. Number 6, CIC's mandate and trustee participation. And finally, number 7, motions with budget impact. Suggestion to have discussion on that. So these are, Madam Chair, these are results of the survey, our kind of brief analysis and summary. And with that, we're ready to address any comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think these will be helpful when we go back through the points for consideration and reflect on what our colleagues are saying, if there is much deviation from the consensus of the committee, to have further discussion. Do any trustees have any more comments on this particular agenda item? Otherwise, we'll move forward with the continuation of where we were at in discussion of the bylaws. I'm not seeing any comments. So do we need a motion to receive the survey results? No. Okay. So we will carry on, please, to the next item on the agenda, which would be the continuation of our budget discussions. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we finished discussions right before the item in front of you. This is slide number 23. And this is with regard to criteria
We go to slide
regarding number of delegations and time limits.
Excuse me for 1 minute. Can you move forward to slide 23, please? It's at the end of this deck. What's the issue? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So criteria regarding number of delegations and time limits. So you can see information from other school boards. I believe we briefly talked about at the previous meeting. So somewhat consistent with the TDSB bylaws, 10 delegations per meeting for the Toronto Catholic, Peel, and York region. Dufferin has 5 delegations per meeting, 5 minutes per delegation, and Halton, 6 delegations, 5 minutes per delegation, 5 minutes to respond to questions. Madam Chair, would you like me to go through all remaining, or we will have discussion on this one?
If you could go through them all so we understand the scope of the discussion today, I think that would be really helpful, and then we'll come back one at a time. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next one is connected to delegations. So essentially, our bylaws allow for in-person, virtual, or written submissions. And you can see in the slide, it's the next slide, please. In the next slide, yes. You can see here that Toronto Catholic, essentially same rules. York, exactly the same. Some variations in Peel, they allow for in-person and or virtual. Halton did not specify, we didn't find information, and Dufferin in-person or written. And if we can move to the next slide, it's also connected to delegations. Anonymous written delegations. School boards do not allow those, including TDSB. If we could move to the next one. And this is with regard to delegations in private sessions. Toronto Catholic allows, as determined by board or committee chair or director. Peel does not allow. Halton does not. York and Dufferin do allow, as well as TDSB. Madam Chair, these are all items for consideration for discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Plotnikoff. So shall we go back to a general conversation about delegations again to see if there's consensus of the committee? Should we do it from the slide, or should we simply just have the conversation? So it's really about the number, the length of time, the anonymity, if you have to decide who you are, and whether they should be in private. Those were the 4 points here, but there were other points raised in the survey. So let's talk about the number, the length of time, and would anyone like to go first?
Sure.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. Please go ahead, and then Trustee King.
Thank you, and through the chair. I definitely think you should identify yourself. I think you should have to be a member of the TDSB community. I think we talked about that. I think it's expected, and I think it's a pretty good expectation that the public has that they can delegate to us. I think it's valuable to us. I think sometimes it's a little problematic, but for the most part, I think it's a good example. I think it creates an opportunity of transparency and openness for the board to hear. So I'm in favor of something around a designated limit, I think, in terms of time, like an hour or something like that for delegations. And if that means that the chair moves the time from 5 to 3 to accommodate for those so they get more delegate, I think that should get to be at the discretion of the chair. So that there's an option. I think, the 5-minute standard is nice. If you only got 5 people, you can afford to give the 5 minutes. If you're starting to get up there and to allow more people to speak, the chair has the authority to, within the hour, move that down to 3. That makes sense to me. And I do think that we should, like, there is sometimes exceptions. The FBEC, we spent 9 hours yesterday doing this. We do this annually for FBEC's budget. We always treat that uniquely. So I do think there should be a caveat that in either whether we identify them or we create an opportunity to dedicate an extended period of time, that should be an option. It shouldn't be a closed door thing. But that was my fundamental reaction to, I think, what was offered.
Thank you very much, Trustee McLean. Trustee King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not too much has changed for me since we discussed this last meeting. I still agree that the number and length of delegations should be determined by guided by a duration overall. So if 1 hour is assigned to delegations for the meeting, then as Trustee McLean said, the variables can be the number of delegates and the time that they're given. I think that I just want to reiterate, I think what we saw yesterday in the special meeting on how delegations were handled for FBEC, I think was exemplary. I think, having the different timeframes for the day really allowed for just really great organization and accessibility for the public as well. So I just wanted to comment, thank you to those that were involved. And I think that's a great practice that we can have in mind as we move forward. The only question for me is with regards to delegating in private meetings. Trying to just ascertain an example where that might occur. And I'm wondering if staff might be able to comment just based on the scan of York and Dufferin Peel. If you can help me out with some examples of when there might be an item that is private to the public, but the public is able to delegate.
Would staff like to speak to that?
Through the chair, this would involve a matter that is before the closed session. So if it has to do with the security of the property of the board, a private personnel matter, a private legal matter, all the listed under section 207 of the Ed Act, anything related to that where the board moves into private. If somebody would like to address the board on any of those issues, it will have to be heard in private.
So just to probe, they wouldn't know if it's on the agenda. They would simply request a matter under the Education Act that would be discussed in private to address the board.
Exactly.
Does that help, Trustee King?
That does help me understand the scenario, and I'll need to just give that some thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I may add, they would not necessarily know that, they would not know that the item is on the agenda, but if they have something that they wish to bring to the board, that would fall under one of these categories.
Thank you. Trustee Williams, would you like to go next?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So, similar to the comments on this previously, I agree, and I'm in favor of having, delegations fit in with in a time frame to manage the meeting agenda, and leave it similar to what it is now at 5 minutes, but at 3 minutes at the discretion of the chair of the standing committee. Um,
Is that it? Trustee Williams?
yes, thanks. I lost my thought on my other point,
No
but I
problem.
might come back to it.
You can always come back. May I pass the
Yes.
chair, please, Trustee McLean?
Yeah, please proceed.
Thank you very much. On those items, I think I'm in alignment with my colleagues. Up to an hour, 5 minutes, it can be 3. Special delegation meetings can be held if there's, depending on the topic and the number of requests. But I'd like to add that is in our delegation procedure, but I'm wondering if it should be in bylaws, which is you have to be, the item has to be on the agenda, and that you have to be a TDSB or live in Toronto as a parent, a student, or community member. I also do believe you have to be named and identify with if you're a student, a parent, or community member. But I'm concerned about if a school has to be named or a business has to be named. I'm not quite sure of the privacy feature of that. I'd like staff to consider that. Or if it targets the parent, like a parent from Purple School, for example, maybe doesn't want to identify that they're from Purple School. I don't know. I'm just asking the question. And then the other thing that may be slightly offside, I really question staff coming to the boardroom to address the board. I believe that staff have their union representatives, and I don't mind at all as a standing delegation item. We hear from our union and federation representatives on any issues of the agenda, but I think delegations should be made through the union or federation leadership. I don't believe we should be hearing from individual staff advocating to trustees. But that isn't in that would be new. So I'm not sure how my colleagues feel about that. That could be a consideration or not, but I find it uncomfortable because many times they delegate on operational issues that we don't have a say over anyway. And I'm really wondering about the process of involving their leadership, I guess. But anyway, I'm not sure. I just want to throw it out there. But I really wonder if some of the procedures should be right in bylaws in terms of the item needs to be on the agenda. And that's why I am in favor of that general comment about, quarterly or bi-monthly, a come ask the board or speak to the board kind of evening, where people could ask us questions about things that we haven't thought of, maybe bring innovative ideas, or suggest things. I don't know. It's just those are some of my rambling thoughts. And I'll take the chair back.
I'd like to go on the list, please.
Trustee McLean and then Trustee King. I'm sorry, Trustee Williams.
She was first.
Oh, Trustee Williams was first. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you through you, Madam Chair. The point about staff, the discussion about whether staff should be allowed the opportunity to come and delegate at our standing committees, I'm, more leaning towards allowing that, and they make the declaration at the outset of whether they're employed by the board. Some of the staff do wear multiple hats, like they're an employee, they're a parent, et cetera. But just a requirement in the, and I'm not sure if it needs to be in the bylaw, but it needs to be clear, like identifying their positioning, like whether they're a staff member or not, and in what capacity they're delegating. Um, there was another point around, you know, the jurisdictional positioning of the folks that come to delegate. I think they should be in the city of Toronto, um, you know, rather than from other jurisdictions coming to delegate. So those were just a few of my thoughts and comments on some of those items.
Thank you very much. We'll go to trustee McLean, then trustee Arts and trustee King. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair. Me too. I'm a little with the staff. I'm kind of divided. I agree that I don't think staff should come here for issues of that refer to their contractual duties. But like we heard from the librarians last night, and that was a bit like I guess it was somewhat self-serving, but it was, I thought it also helped with the I thought it was constructive, and they were, so I do think there's a challenge there. I do think having them come and tell us they're not getting their appropriate union breaks is not it's not a conversation I want to hear, nor is it the place I think it should happen. But I do think there's somewhere in there, there's a balance. Naming the school, I do think that I do not understand why we do that. Not everybody does. In the last night, you know, we were here for a long time, got to see a bunch of different people describe themselves. I do think it is potential, like if you're the school chair and you want to share that, then that's one thing. But I do think there may be a reluctance for me, just a parent of someone in a school, to suggest I represent the school, and then I might be less reluctant. I might have to measure my contribution more, because I'm perceiving that, you know, that maybe people think I'm speaking for everyone, and really I'm just trying to speak for my experience and the experience of my children. So I'm not sure how that helps us. I do think it creates a mechanism that is potentially problematic. If they want to offer it, you know, I'm Dan McLean, my kids attend, great. Like there's no downside to that. It's not a don't do, but I think making it a requirement, I think, is potentially awkward. And then the last thing I'll address, I really like the idea of the quarterly meeting where we come and we kind of open it up. That being said, there were multiple. If we're going to do that, I think we collectively have to make a greater effort than we did last night. Let's say we dedicated 9 hours for FBAC, and some of it was during the day. Colleagues never had an opportunity to do that, but there was also good portions of that meeting where there were very few trustees in the room, very few members of the committee on the room. And that's awkward, and that's the optics of that are really bad. Like and we had a couple delegates reference that. And I agree. Like, I think if we dedicate, you come and the room's a skeleton crew, I think that's awkward. So I really like the quarterly idea where we throw it open and we hear from people. But if we're going to do that, I think then we would have to amongst ourselves make a commitment that we were going to attend and really make every effort to personally attend, because I think it's better for people when they can look you in the eye. I think they like that, to be able to, particularly those who make the effort to come in person to do that.
Appreciate that. Trustee Arts.
Hi, thanks. So most of my questions have been asked or answered or commented on, and I'm aligned with the other comments. Just to Trustee McLean's comment about, last night, how few of us were in the room, or even on, like, appeared online, or like, you know, asked questions. So it was clear they were online. Like, it was, as a special day set aside, it was very noticeable. But So maybe because we have new rules from the province coming in regarding mandatory attendance, that if we were going to go with a quarterly or whatever, twice a year, whatever the number was of an open delegation session,
3 times, once a term.
that it would be a board meeting and then it would be mandatory to attend. Just throwing that out there. We have that tool now. But
Thank
that's
you.
it. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Trustee King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll come around and just comment on a couple of the other items. Absolutely agree with delegations being limited to items on the agenda. And I had the same thought as Trustee Arts. I believe that having one opportunity per term or 2 per school year, I think more than that is
Perfect.
likely unrealistic. And having it part as PPC, I think, is the way to get full participation. With regards to anonymity, I would suggest collecting a name and postal code exchange to confirm the relationship to the city, and agree with not including the school or not requiring it. The staff item, thank you for raising that. I like the opportunity of staff being able to come. I think that there may sometimes be challenges for their voices being heard in the other channels that are available to them. I think that in our consideration of some areas where maybe we don't have necessarily a depth of expertise, it's valuable to hear some of the comments and experiences from on the ground and the expertise of staff as it pertains to our decisions regarding policy and governance. And I think just something to help guide whether they are speaking as a parent, an organization, or staff, so we're aware of that, and just some guidance so that they're reminded of what the purpose in this space is as well.
Thank you very much. So I think there was consensus that staff should still be allowed as long as they identify themselves, and on some of the other items, I think we're pretty much there on delegations. So what should our next conversation be? Shall we go back through the survey? Or what, or are
thank you,
there
Madam
other
Chair.
items that we haven't discussed at all?
I would suggest if the committee's preference would be to go through the survey questions because
Certainly.
for at least some questions, we didn't have discussion at all.
Certainly. If we could go back then, please. Mensch, if you don't mind, going back to the survey and going back to the first section. And some of the sections we can go through quite quickly because we have had conversation, and it might just help clarify our consensus too, because some of them we talked about over a month ago already. So if we can go back through the deck, back to, I guess, page 3, maybe page 4. Page 3. Thank you. Next page, please. Thank you. Okay, we didn't know if you can go back. We did not discuss temporarily suspending a provision of the bylaw. Should committees be able to suspend provisions of the bylaw? It looks like the majority said no. The committee never actually discussed this. Mr. Chair, I'm going to pass it and I'll speak right away. I don't believe this is appropriate to suspend bylaws at committee. And I will take the chair back and go to a speakers list if anybody else wants to comment on this. Trustee Williams, I see your mute is off. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you through you, Madam Chair. I agree. and in favor of not suspending our bylaws in our standing committees.
Thank you. Trustee Arts?
I agree. I think like the rules are looser. Sorry, that's not the right word, but anyway, they're more lenient in standing committees. There's more time for speaking. There's more. It's more geared towards interaction, and the rules that are there are to maintain order and decorum. And so, I don't see what you would suspend. At least at the moment, that would then not contribute to chaos.
Thank you very much. Any other trustees want to comment, or I think we have consensus here. Next slide, please. Specific reference to Indigenous student trustees be added to the bylaws. I kind of like the idea about asking them, frankly. Does anyone have a comment to add? Trustee McLean.
Well, I just thank you, and through the chair, I think that acknowledging that
They exist.
it's a separate position, there's a separate pathway to it. Like the Elders Council and through the
Right.
UICAC decides who represents the Indigenous community. It is not done like the other two seats are filled through an election, through a vote. So I think
In the committee.
I think they are unique. I think I don't think, so I think acknowledging the reality is a good idea, I guess.
Thank you very much. Trustee Arts.
Since there is a new student governance procedure or policy or procedure, should our bylaws not align with that new policy?
I'm sorry, Trustee Arts, can you
We have
explain that a little bit better?
Well, we just approved a new student governance policy.
Oh, I gotcha. So
and
align the two, make sure they're aligned.
yeah, so the same,
Thank you.
that information should reflect, our bylaws should reflect what's in there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a really good point. I don't see anyone else, so moving on to the next slide. The election of board chair and vice chair closed, but yeah, I think we've all been agreed here, so move on, please. Next slide. Planning and priorities clarification. Okay. This might be a point of conversation. Does anybody want to start whether we see PPC as a committee of the whole board, meaning it needs to be in person, or if we change the nomenclature so it can still be in person and virtual? Trustee McLean?
Thank you, and through the chair. Yeah, I think if there's a legislative way out of this, and the rules that bind with the mandatory, I think we should be looking to exercise that flexibility. I think the creation of this mandatory attendance is problematic, carries a whole lot of things with it. The notion of putting ourselves in a box doesn't seem constructive to me. That being said, the spirit of I'm fully in favor of what the spirit of the legislation says, so that more people are in the room having discussions. I think that's a good thing. But to put these hard line rules in place and create challenges with ramifications, I think we should avoid if we can.
Thank you very much. Trustee King.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think last meeting, part of the discussion we were having was trying to understand committee of the whole as a format versus a meeting type. And based on a little bit more digging that I found, it seems that committee of the whole is often more of a place of the full Board of Trustees to come together to talk about a specific item more in depth. before it comes to board. And I don't believe that that's the nature of our PPC meetings. I believe that they are more of a format so that the mandatory attendance would not be required. So I'm in line with other trustees so far on that. And I think that was the only portion on that, correct?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So if I can pass the chair, Trustee McLean. I also think that once a month mandatory required attendance at board is appropriate. And I would love to see other language about encouraging in-person attendance now. Because I think that we don't see each other very often. And I think it's much easier to work with each other when we get to know each other a little bit better through informal opportunities when we're in person. So I'm in line with what Trustee McLean said. The encouragement of being in person, I think is helpful, but I do think we should try to structure our bylaws and our committees so it's only mandatory for that monthly meeting. And I'll take the chair back. Anyone else comment? Trustee Williams.
Thank you to you, Madam Chair. With PPC, I'm in agreement with the positioning of moving it from a committee of the whole and positioning it as a standing committee so that the in-person attendance is not a mandatory piece there, but encouraged. So I think I really agree with the positioning of PPC in that way.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The only question I would have, maybe it's for later discussion, if it's not a committee of the whole, it doesn't require all trustees.
We can build that into our bylaws, though, that our planning and priority meeting requires membership of 22.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Well, sorry, I would ask staff if they can confirm that then if it was a committee that was all 22 trustees, if that then jumped it up to this other mandatory piece, I guess is your point.
Yeah, thank you through you, Madam Chair. Like just the clarity of the technicality, let's call it, of that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Ms. Joseph Dowers has a comment and then I'll go to Trustee McLean.
So I just want to point out then, you shouldn't call it a standing committee because right now the bylaws state that trustees could only be a member of one standing committee. So is it then a special committee?
Call it a special committee. Or one, it's mandatory that a trustee is on the policy and planning committee and chooses one other committee. Like I'm sure the language can be worked out. Trustee McLean.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm just going to share the Catholic Board's philosophy with this. And they don't have like we do. We have 3 committees and we divide them all up, but they're members on all their committees. They have like 12 members and they're members on everything. So they're going to be drafting legislation to, the mandatory and trying to, although all of them will be on the separate ones, they're going to be looking for a mechanism also to suggest that they're not in the mandatory box that comes with all the ramifications with that, because that would require in their cycle, that would require them to be, they would have 5 mandatory meetings a month.
Thank you for that clarity. Next slide, please. So this is the FBEC mandate about updates needed. Mr. Chair of FBEC, do you have any comments on this one?
I don't see a problem with the TLC things coming. I mean, I think most of them are, you can make an argument that are revenue in one fashion or another. So that is not a problem. Program content be shifted to PSSC. I guess I'm not understanding what that is Because if you'd asked me, I would have said our program content currently goes to PSSC. So I'm not really understanding what that would mean. And determining one committee for facilities matters. I like the new facilities and capital projects now are done differently. They're taken out of FBAC, and do they come quarterly to FBAC, or do they where do they come? I'm sure they haven't come yet, so I'm not 100% sure what what was decided by the governance policy about, but we don't get those anymore. Starting today, there will be no facilities or capital projects being approved today. They're done in a quarterly report, and I'm not even sure where
That's
that goes.
contracts. I think you're thinking of contracts. Facilities would mean, wouldn't facilities mean like long-term program and accommodation strategy issues?
Oh, okay. Then you want to is that what this is asking for, a separate committee then for that?
One committee for facility matters. I think they're thinking that anything to do with our building should go to one committee. But I think your point that that we've already changed the contract piece. So what other facility, to your point, what other facility issues come through board agenda?
Right.
Right.
So I guess I'm not really understanding whoever the
Thank you.
intent of what's being requested.
Gotcha. If I can pass the chair, because I don't see anyone else. I actually think Toronto Lands Corporation should not be shifted to FBEC. I think that's about planning. And I think that still belongs at Planning and Priorities Committee. That's just my personal viewpoint. Program is in program. Facility matters. I think we'd need some staff clarification on will there be any facility matters? Because right now the facilities are just through contracts, letting us know what's happening. A facility report on updating, modernizing our schools, for example. What committee would that go to? I'm assuming that should go through planning and priorities, just like the long-term program and accommodation strategy. But obviously, if our colleagues have any other, Trustee King, Trustee Williams, Trustee Arts, any further comments? Trustee King?
I think that the TLC reports may be coming as for information for FBAC might be helpful. So in one place or for approval, but another place, the folks that are governing finance at least have an eye on seeing some of that activity. And I am also not clear about what kind of program content or facility matter we're talking about. So I'd love to hear from staff if there was more either in their question of or in the responses that were provided.
Thank you. I'll go to Trustee Arts and then maybe staff can comment before we leave this item.
Yeah,
Trustee.
I'm the one who put on the survey that I think that overall, like our overall, with the opportunity to look at our overall committee structure, and if we're moving away from a committee of the whole type of thing, could we actually realign the mandates of all the committees to essentially absorb the content of PPC? But I get that the facilities one kind of doesn't fit anywhere else. And the program pieces that we've had at PPC really do make more sense to go to PSSC. And yeah, so I agree with what's on the page here that the financials shifted to FBEC, which will increase the FBEC load, but I think it needs a rethink. Like if we're shifting the content, what does that do to the load on the other committees? Because yeah, PPC is kind of a mixed bag of stuff, the big projects and reviews and stuff like that, but they do also fit into most of the other existing committee mandates. And we have to think about do we need PPC? Like if we're shifting things over, but what does that do to the load on the other committees? Do we have to change the timing?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, your thinking is we don't have 4 committees, that PPC goes away and whatever was being discussed at PPC is divided up into 3 committees whose mandates and titles may be subject to change. So I think that's a question for staff in terms of managing agendas, to be completely honest with you.
Mhm.
But Trustee McLean.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair. Yeah, I'm a hard no to that. PPC has a massive agenda as it is, the concept that we're going to divide it and subdivide it and then only have a divided amount of group decide it and then go to board. That means that when we got to board, we would be pulling an abundance of issues off to discuss and to settle, because the decisions that were made or the recommendations the committee wouldn't be made by the bunch, would be only be made by a few. And I think that would make board unmanageable. I think that makes the committee meetings unmanageable. So I very much in favor of still having PPC or whatever we're going to call it or do with it, but the concept at least. Trustee Laskin won me over a little bit about FBEC, although I still don't, I'm still a 5149 thing. I do agree that now that we've moved it a little bit, FBEC would have some time when it's not in the part of budget season to deal with these things. Although I do think I can see that the benefits of the visions and interesting things that come out of TLC, it would be a shame if only a third of the budget heard them and were aware of them. And so I like the idea that they come to the 22, although I do acknowledge PPC's agendas get carried, like those meetings can go for a long time and half the time we bump stuff. And so managing the workload is I think a reasonable part of this. So I'm of no help in this regard at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. Trustee King, did you have a new comment to make? I'm sorry, I've lost. Okay. I think if we move on, there's another thing about mandates. So if we can go to the next slide, because I remember something about CAC mandates. Comments and questions on this. Anyone want to start? Trustee Arts, this is a little bit of your pet peeve. Did you want to start on CACs?
Yeah, so I just, full disclosure, I love our CICs. I love our in terms of our volunteers and how dedicated they are and the expertise they bring. I do not think we are serving them and their time very well with our CICs, and it really depends on which one you're looking at. They are all, there is a definition of CACs and what they're supposed to be doing, and that is not what our CACs are doing. And I don't think that definition actually serves the needs of all the committees, because some of them work really well. They meet regularly. They have, they are very engaged. They have a large, volunteer community. They provide feedback to staff and much needed interaction, but they are not an advisory committee to the board. CICs are also taking up significant staff time, which we don't have a lot of. And especially where those committees or those volunteers really want access to staff or a safe space or whatever, the CAC structure is not appropriate and it is causing frustration. So we actually don't for trustees. Like we have some loosely defined roles for trustees under our new procedures, but we don't have a good consultation framework. We don't have like an active, this will go at this time, the items from this committee or under this policy will go to the CACs for, meaningful consultation at a particular time. Our consultation framework for policies is very good. But that, I think once we get past the policy staff and the framework that's being developed, then the implementation at the CAC side is not happening. And we don't have like a handbook for trustees really to do this. This is really our responsibility as trustees, not staff necessarily. And then what I'm noticing is that when we're doing broader reviews in the system, that like we have a consultation framework through policies that is very good, but it's not necessarily applied to other types of reviews, so it creates some inconsistencies. And yeah, trustee participation. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the list that's on the slide here. We got a few more people to step up, but honestly, we have some trustees who've never sat on CIC as long as I've been at the board. And others of us who are having to pick up fill those gaps and sit on multiple committees. And it's not because we have oodles of extra time to do this. So
Appreciate your comments. Trustee King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's tremendous value in the CACs, but I would agree that this is one where the entire framework, I think, really needs a relook to be effective for where we are now. I think that we are heavily staff reliant and staff led in our CACs right now. I think that there is certain skill sets that are needed that we don't necessarily have in terms of facilitation, and just some of the meeting management with some of the issues that we're dealing with. I'd agree with Trustee Arts. We could benefit from more consistency in what kind of items are coming to each of those groups and when. I also find that in my experience, many of our families within TDSB are coming to CACs as a place for navigation and support. And that would suggest to me that there is either a different need that we need to look at serving as well, or improving, or there might be another function of those advisory councils that's available as well. I think that having advisory councils be able to facilitate conversation around emerging issues is something that's worth looking at. And I think that might help us manage some of the other ways that folks are trying to speak with us. So the volume of delegations, different campaigns and such. And then lastly, I would say that I believe that we currently have a bit of duplication in the way that our CACs are working with different working groups that staff are engaged in, advisory groups on different specific items. And I wonder about just how much we're relying on kind of the same bodies, or splitting and duplicating efforts, and if we can be more effective in that way.
Thank you very much, Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair. I've served on the French committee for an extended period, so I'm going to share Mary's voice as if she was here. Like, if we can do this in conjunction with the work that's ongoing, then I think, doing this once, wrapping it up with a bow and saying we're done is great, but they're tired of being poked for mission statements and fiddle in a box, now being asked, they were all asked to conform. And then now we're going through a process where, what do you want to be? And they're done trying to perform, trying to figure out what it is we want from them, so that they set themselves up so that at the end of the day, we'll vote to have them, because it's an optional thing and they don't understand where the target is, so that they can get in line and look attractive to those deciding. So whatever we're going to do with them, I think we should be doing it in part of the current evaluations that are going on, because I think once we make a decision, we should let them be for a while and let them do their work, and let us benefit from it to the extent that we do.
Thank you very much, Trustee Arts.
Yeah, I agree with Trustee McLean. Just one thing I would bring up is that in the review process that we've asked the CACs to engage in this year, equity policy and ICCAC are meeting together. and they have asked staff or trustees and staff to bring together the CAC co-chairs, like either all of them or the ones that are engaged in equity work, for a conversation to help them. So one of the questions they have asked, and it was really good, Omar Khan, our co-chair for ICCAC, posed the question. He said, what we should really be looking at is, what they want to look at is, what is the multi-year strategic plan? What are the, what are the equity advisory needs of the board? And what is the committee structure that would serve that? So they want to meet with the other equity focused CACs for a conversation to help ICCAC and EPCAC determine what they're going to make as a recommendation to the board for, either changing their mandates or, consolidating or a new committee. And so that's a little bit of thoughtful work on this side to look at what are the needs of the board, like where is their overlap, and how do we better define and make this more efficient.
Thank you very much for that, Michelle. So I'm not sure where we go from here, except that it feels like this section in the bylaws will need some work. So Mr. Plotnikoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment on that. I believe this discussion and exchange of thoughts are extremely important and of great help. At the same time, I think the issue of CAC's interaction with the board, interaction with staff, are governed by a policy. We have parent and caregiver engagement policy, P023, and we have 2 operational procedures under that. So I think this discussion, this information and feedback would not end up in the bylaws per se, but will have broader impact on that policy and operational procedures discussion.
Excellent point. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. Meeting management. So this is about the chair's ability to manage meetings. I think everybody on this call has chaired committee. And I'm wondering what staff wanted to get out of this and if they need us to provide direction.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this section would have direct connection to the delegation procedure, and perhaps bylaws as well could be expanded and clarified on the chair's authority. Perhaps those definitions, negative, critical, derogatory, could be incorporated in the bylaws. So if that's the preference of the committee, staff will work on those items. Thank you.
I see Trustee McLean has shaken his head. Yes, I would agree with that. And I think in advance, we thank staff for their work to try to make this clear for us. Next slide, please. Emergency business. Comments? Majority seem to prefer status quo. I don't see any comments. Let's move on. Next slide. Consent agenda. I have some strong feelings on this one. I'm going to pass the chair, trustee McLean. I do not agree with any consent agendas for committees. I think the whole work of the board is through the committee structure. So I simply would agree to a consent agenda at the board. I also very much like the idea that when staff meet with the chairs of the committees to discuss the board agenda, this thought says maybe staff should. My feeling would be when the agenda is discussed, that group, so it would include trustee chairs, would determine the focus of the meeting, I guess I would put, and remove some items from consent before it goes out for the survey. That would be my preference, and I'll take the chair back. And I saw trustee Williams' hand up and then trustee McLean.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the first item did jump out at me, and totally agree, like the consent agenda for committees, I don't think would be appropriate. You know, that's where the discussion, the meat of the discussions happen. You know, the item about increasing the requirement to lift the agenda, consent agenda items, I don't think that's, I wouldn't be in favor of that. Like for trustees lifting, requesting to lift the item from consent, it sounds reasonable and has been reasonable in my opinion. It's kind of like an administrative thing, but having that, an easier way to indicate the request to lift the item, having that more automated, I think would be very helpful. Yeah, just in my observation, like most folks don't follow the instructions that are provided by governance for lifting, like the instructions given. So maybe something would be, having something automated would be very helpful. And I think that is it for my comments on this item so far. Thank you, through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, trustee McLean, and then trustee Arts.
Thank you. And I too think an automated system would be ideal, because it would, not only would it would have a hard deadline on it, and it would produce a report at the end of the deadline telling you exactly. And so we would get a little more notice than we sometimes get. The bottom about the staff should identify, I agree that that shouldn't be a staff responsibility only, but I don't like sometimes we shouldn't be looking for things. It's like sometimes there's very important things that the board's going to do in its meeting, but we shouldn't always be married to the concept that we have to be finding two more things to put on what we already know to be a busy agenda. Richard Christie came to our last because we all wanted him to crow about the success of the environmental, and he sat here for 5 hours and we didn't get to him. I think we need to be careful about artificially adding things to the agenda.
Gotcha. Trustee Arts.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that last point. And your point earlier, trustee Laskin, about I have been to board meetings where something that should have been celebrated was not pulled, and so I think that it's great if the chair can look for items ahead of time that should be highlighted, and we keep that in mind, and we know, like, it would be helpful to know what those items are before we're asked about consent agenda, so we can see, we get an idea of how much is already on the agenda before we pull additional good news items, I guess, and what kind of items we're pulling. And so my only comment on consent agenda would be where we get reports that are essentially for information. So I think last time we discussed the differences between reports for approval reports for feedback and reports for information. And I don't know how the new reporting structure will change how that's delivered, but I'm finding that the essentially consent agenda or that information section for GPC for procedures works very well right now. Everybody gets notice of it. They get the content. They're able to ask questions, but it does save us significant time in the committee structure, I think. So I don't know how that's applied to in a similar format to other committees.
Thank you. If I can just probe a little bit. So what you're saying is you wouldn't take off anything off the consent agenda if it wasn't for an actual decision to be made.
Yeah, so if staff are not necessarily seeking feedback to adjust something, or we're not actually approving it, then I know there was discussion about sharing updates via Trustees Weekly, shifting some stuff to Trustees Weekly, but that Trustees Weekly, that's
Isn't
great.
public.
But it's not public. Yeah, it does
Right.
not put it in the public realm. And a for information section, a for information section or consent section might be a place for the information updates to go that then aren't necessarily incorporated into the meeting time.
Or it could just say staff updates, a section on staff updates.
Yes.
Whatever. Thank you very much for those comments. Does anyone else have any other comments here? Trustee King.
Thank you quickly, Madam Chair. I am aligned with everything that's been shared and just want to add that when the chair, together with staff, are identifying those 1 or 2 agenda items they might want to add, when they are achievement oriented or something like the climate action, I would just suggest that they should also be prioritized in the agenda. So that could look like a regular format of how we move through celebrations, leadership report, and then a marquee type staff report.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. Michelle, assuming you've got a residual hand up, so going to the next slide. Thank you. Unlimited time speaking at committees. Okay, we've discussed this a bit. I think where we landed was we agreed with potentially limiting the number of times, but we weren't clear about the 3 minutes or 5 minutes. If I can pass the chair, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to limit it to 3, and I would do 5 minutes. It's really our job to speak at committee and provide advice. I would not want to. I agree with limiting the number of times because over 15 minutes you should be able to get, but I don't like the 5, 3, and 3. I think there should be a set time, and I prefer 5 rather than 3, but I do support a limit. And I'll take the chair back and look for other comments from colleagues. Trustee McLean.
Thank you. And through the chair. And if we limit the number to 3, I can certainly live with 5. I just think the others, but it certainly, if we limit it to 3, I think that works. We still, this is just a committee. We're not talking about board yet. So yeah, okay. Yeah, that would work for me. Making the adjustment to 3 times for 5 minutes would be fine.
Thank you, Trustee King.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, I'm also in agreement with 3 rounds, full 5 minutes. We need that discussion time. So yeah.
Thank you. How about the point? Does anyone want to comment on the point about speaking priority to committee members? Trustee Williams, not that you have to speak to that, but I'm just drawing your attention to that piece too. Trustee Williams.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just for I'm also in agreement with the 3 times and 5 minute time frame on those 3 times for speaking at committee. And I actually agree with the prioritizing the committee members to speak.
For first round?
Yeah, because all trustees have an opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee McLean, back to you.
Yeah, so now it's time to stand alone, apparently, through you, Madam Chair. I don't like the distinction. I don't like that out of a chair's mouth is going to come, trustee blank, you're not on the committee, ergo, we'll hear from you in 10 minutes. Like, just the optics of it sound off. I don't find this is to be a problem. I'm not, in my experience on the board, I don't think this is a problem that needs a solution. Like, I think that it works the way it works. I understand conceptually what's being done here, but I think it would make for some awkward moments. And to the public, it would be prioritizing where you were, it would appear to be prioritizing some colleagues over others who wouldn't necessarily know. So I think that I wouldn't necessarily be supportive of that nature.
Thank you very much. If I can pass the chair. I actually think it's very easy for the chair to manage a list and do the committee members. And the reason why I say that is because I think if you're on a committee, you should be participating on the committee. And I've been to too many committee meetings where it's just members of the board, and committee meetings are completely silent through most of the meeting. So I personally like the idea of the first round priority to committee members. And it's like I've been doing here. You know, I tend to go around and then say others. So, but again, I'm not looking to fix a problem that exists. I'm looking to encourage participation of committee members. But at the end of the day, if there's not a real consensus on this one, I'm prepared to just park it for next time. Really doesn't, I'm mixed. Trustee Arts.
I'm going to go backwards to this. So I'm mixed on that one. I'm not finding that, yeah, I'm not finding that that's a problem between the members and non-members on the committees. Between shortened times or limit to 2 or 3 times, I would say I would be in favor if we left it at 5 minutes, that we shortened to 3. But I also like the idea of, if we stick with 5 minutes, that we cap it at 3. But I like the idea of shortening the speaking time to 3 minutes. Because I think, I have to think about the wording here. I think it would take the wind out of some sails when somebody gets on a rant and they're, and are, asking the same question over and over. I think 3 minutes and then potentially, a break to step away would also be good for, not having someone, because honestly, for 5 minutes, by the time that staff are answering, sometimes that's 15 minutes before the next person gets to speak. So shortening to 3 minutes and not necessarily having a limit, but still being able to call the question would, one of those two would be great. And I think some training for the chairs and some language on the repetitive abusive questioning. I'm having to intervene with that a lot. And yeah, it's not an occasional thing.
Thank you very much. So we have a little bit of we're still not quite there yet. I think we've all agreed to limit, whether it's 5 minutes or 3. Mr. Vitale, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it's a clarification question from staff. On most of the items, the committee does not have full consensus. So would the committee be comfortable if we still reflect the different opinions as part of the options that we suggested. Those options could be incorporated in the bylaws, certain provisions, and then either this committee or this committee with the GPC would further discuss and potentially identify the preferred recommendation.
Perfect. Thank you. Next one, please. Ending debate. I think we kind of covered this one in the other one. I think that people still wanted an ability to end debate, even if there was a number of times. At least that's what I heard. Does anyone feel strongly? I'm not seeing any hands. Next one, please. Minority report. I think we leave this in staff's capable hands. I think it's just potentially asking for more clarity. Next one, please. Motions with budget impacts. Okay, this might be a conversation. On this one, I will try not to go first. Colleagues, who would like to go first on this one? Okay, people are not all running to put up their hands, so I will pass the chair. I do think that new initiatives that have budgets, I like that they go to FBEC. And I don't think it's possible to send consolidated requests to meet during the budget process because these come up with new motions from trustees. And I think they'd be pretty pissed if they were held for, 6 months until of the consolidated meeting. Some of them are more timely than others. So I don't agree with that. But I do believe that a new initiative, and I do believe that probably that does have to be defined. And I think it ties in with a motion template that I'd like to talk about at some point. Because I do think depending on the wording of the motion, I'll bring it up now. I think there should be a template on motions that every trustee has to follow. It has to go through governance services. One would have to, through governance services, they would confirm whether it was procedurally appropriate, aligned with policy, and if it had a financial impact, and to ensure that all that was completed. And then it's governance services that provides the motion to trustees. It doesn't go back and forth. That's my 2 cents worth. And I'm happy then to take the chair back and go to comments from my colleagues. Trustee Williams, and then Trustee Arts and Trustee McLean.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So the first item, are having financial initiatives, anything that impacts the budget, go to FBEC. Makes perfect sense to me. And I'd like to see that continue. Oh, and just to follow up on some of the comments, Trustee Laskin, you made on having a template for motions. I'm very much in favor of that, and that process of having that come through governance. Obviously the discussions and the development it happens in a discussion among trustees with colleagues, but what comes as a notice of motion, it would be very helpful, I believe, if there was a template to guide that, and coming from governance. So those are just my initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Arts, and then Trustee McLean.
Yeah, sorry, my brain is now focused on the template because I think this is a fantastic idea and just the ways it could ease, not just, get motions properly ordered and looked at, but would also maybe actually allow staff to, like we do for like the CIC recommendations that come, staff have a section to comment, like, and so with the budget impacts, there could, I think, some of that question about whether it needs to go to FBAC, if this is a minor expense that could be incorporated into an existing budget, and somebody has, done the proper notice of motion and given time, then, staff could already be saying, yeah, we can do this. And if it's we're not sure how we'd fund this, then the committee, yes, would refer to FBAC. Like there could be very clear just pieces. So that I think that would answer the, how is new defined aspect, and the threshold for referral. Like that, some of those pieces could be all taken care of in a good template.
Thank you very much. Trustee McLean.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the last one is, it doesn't work. So I don't think that that's a good idea. I do think there has to be, well, it says, I guess, considered by FBAC or PPC, because I do think sometimes you need to be able to move quickly, and our budget, our meeting cycle sometimes prevents that, whereas PPC running just before board creates an opportunity. So I guess I'm fine with that, and I'm interested in learning more and seeing this template, which would be helpful for me. I think it would help Ms. Joseph Dowers not have to write my motions for me. So I think that would be helpful. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Trustee King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm also very supportive of the idea of the motion template. I think we spoke about that last meeting as well. The only other item that we haven't really touched on that I'm a bit curious about is the idea of threshold for motions going to FBAC for approval. Really love the suggestion by Trustee Arts about having staff comment coming proactively along with the motion. And I'm wondering if that would allow for information about funding source and implications when it is, I'll say, less consequential. And if there are times where FBAC might actually, the committee might need some consideration, and we might be seeking that recommendation along with the motion for greater amounts.
Thank you very much. If I can pass the chair again. So at OPSPA, those of us that are familiar with the way the board works, motions through executive council to the board of directors usually have a comment, whether they're at the annual meeting, you'll see that whether the executive supports it or doesn't support it and comment. So I really do like the idea of, a comment from staff on the motion. Some of us do that informally now by sending our wording to staff to get their opinions ahead of time before we pass it to governance services. But I'm really liking the idea that it's more formalized. Then the other questions that I guess we haven't really talked about is there a timing issue, threshold? Like, I think we're still in agreement of notice of motion first, and then it appears at a committee meeting. But I guess my question is, does it need to appear at the next committee meeting? Or depending on what the motion is it up to the chair when they're setting the agenda to determine, depending on the amount of items in the agenda, whether it's appropriate for that committee or not that committee? We haven't really discussed that a lot. And I just throw it out there because I'm just not 100% sure if some of the, like, every trustee's entitled to make motions. I'm not disputing that at all. But the board staff have their priority work. And I do get concerned sometimes that they have to deviate from that because of an idea brought forward that's new. And I don't mean to say that not appreciating the fact that some of the best ideas come through motions that are unsolicited. But I'm just not quite sure the balance of the ongoing work and then the new work. And I'm just not quite sure. And I think that deserves a discussion maybe amongst, I mean, we don't have a chairs committee. We used to have a chairs committee where the chairs would throw some of this around. So I guess it's partly us. And anyway, I just threw that out there. And now I go to Trustee McLean.
Thank you. And through the chair. I like the idea that trustees can bring motions, but I do think that we need to be very clear with staff to the point that Trustee Laskin shared, that we expect, if we're out looking for reports, we should be realistic about when they come back. And staff should be free to tell us that their plates are full at the moment and it may take 90 days, 120 days. Like if there's nothing pressing in it that suggests that it will lead to a decision that's required in 60 days, then maybe you're not going to get the report for 90 or 100 days. And I think that we need to work with staff to indicate that an understanding of that. Like that, I think they get the sense that, you know, we're all constantly on the clock and we want responses in real time, and we expect them to drop everything on their plate and, you know, look at the latest motion that's done. And I don't think that that's good governance. I don't think that's good strategy, and it's disrespectful to staff. So I do think that a greater discussion should be held with staff and kick this around a little bit. But part of this, I think, has to be staff being honest with us about their workloads and a reasonable timeline when we can expect it.
Thank you very much. Trustee King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I definitely believe that there's a responsibility, a role for the chair in conjunction with staff in the agenda setting. They can, to the earlier points, they can determine, you know, the timing based on workload, based on time sensitivity of the item. But I think the other piece is really the communication with trustees. I think there needs to be an eye to just making sure that an item isn't getting deferred and deferred and deferred, or just not brought up for several cycles.
Understood.
Yeah, I think I had one more point, but I've lost it.
When you
Yes, okay.
When you remember, you please. Oh, come on back. Okay, next one, please. I'm just mindful of time. I'm not sure what the next, this is like exciting. I forget what's the next topic. Meeting end times. Okay. I think where we last were was 10 o'clock and motion to extend to hard stop at 11, but some people felt that the hard stop should be at 10. So do we want to have a conversation? Trustee McLean.
Thank you. And through the chair, I think we should, I like a soft stop at 10 and with a willingness or the ability to extend until 11, which would be a hard stop, but that the business that would happen after 10 would only be considered if it was of a timely nature. If it didn't have to be, we wouldn't therefore extend to hear the environmental studies report because there was no timeline associated with that. That being said, is there another one for start time? Because I think this is problematic if we're not, we also started about talking at 6. So if we're going to start at 6, then the 10 starts to work. If we're not going to start at 6, now we're starting to condense our meetings and then this becomes a little more problematic. So I think it's the same discussion as opposed to 2 separate discussions. And I think starting at 6 would be.
We're talking about board right now, right? Not committee.
Right.
Right. I just wanted to clarify that.
Oh,
We
that's
weren't
what I am.
talking
I'm not
about
sure what-
changing committee meetings to
Is that,
start.
is this designated for committee then? Is that what?
No, I think it's board. Well, I think it could be all, right? It's the same rule for
Right.
all,
But I think if we move board to start at 6,
right?
then
An hour of
soft
delegation.
stop at 10 and a hard stop at 11, is what is my preference.
Gotcha. Comments from other colleagues? Not really seeing. Oh, trustee Williams. Oh, sorry, trustee Williams and then Mr. Plotnikoff.
Thank you Madam Chair. I guess I'm just like chiming in to hopefully add to the consensus if we get to that, starting at 6, having a soft stop at 10 and the hard stop at 11, I think is perfectly reasonable and humane, to be quite honest. So just adding my 2 cents on those timeframes.
Thank you, trustee Arts.
Yes, to everything that was said, just because you were
Thank
looking
you.
for voices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Plotnikoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to remind that in one of the scans, we noticed that at least one school board, they didn't go with soft and hard stops, but it's connected to Trustee McLean's comment. They went with length of the meeting. Once the meeting reaches, let's say, 4 hours or 6 hours, then that's the stop. So it's another approach.
I think we're good with where
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
at. Thank you, though. Appreciate that. Okay, next one, please. After meeting end time is reconsideration. Majority agree with status quo unless there's any conversation. Move it on. Notice of motion, I think we've talked, this is about whether it substantially changes or not. And I think there was consensus that if it substantially changes, it should be new. So next one, please.
I think we should define.
Oh,
We-
define meaningful, define substantial, define the qualifications. Thank you. And the next one? I think we talked about delegations, but is there anything new here? No, I think we've pretty much talked about all these items. Next one. Okay, other items. A private session of the board. Yes, we've had just minimal conversation about that, but I think there's a general consensus if we're starting board meetings at 6 or whether private should be as needed. I think that we probably need to hear from staff back about what the reasonable options are on that one. Responsibility, and we'll align the language. I think everybody agrees that we'll need to align the language. And we've talked about a template for the last point about making sure there's a mechanism. Next, trustee McLean.
Sorry, I'd like to, about number 3.
Oh,
Requiring
sorry.
trustees with mandatory participation on at least one advisory committee. Well, I think that's a great, I think an expectation of that would happen is what I would like to see in the world. But making a trustee go somewhere they don't want to be and creating an expectation for the committee that the trustee is actually going to show up and contribute
And be
and then
careful.
and then ghost the committee. I think the spirit of what this is trying to accomplish works for me, but creating hard and fast, you got to do this, I don't think is in our best interests.
I absolutely agree. Anyone else want to comment on this one? Trustee King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree, and I would just add that if there could be some encouragement for having 12 distinct, or as many CACs as there are at the time, but I think having distinct representation from trustees on each is something that could be encouraged.
Thank you. Next page, please. I think we've talked about that. We've talked about CACs and we've talked about this. So what haven't we talked about that any in the bylaws that anyone on the committee still would like to raise in terms of potential changes? Or maybe I should ask it differently. Is there any other issues that trustees on the committee would like to raise? Trustee, any going once, going twice? Then I think staff, we are finished our deliberations, and I hope we've given you enough information. If you need more information from us, if you could send an email, and I think the four of us could work through email to clarify if you needed anything. But then at the next meeting, I believe we would see some draft options. Is that a good assumption to make?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we will be working on the revisions to the bylaws, and we'll bring to the committee at least the first set, a bundle of provisions with options. That's the plan. At the same time, I wanted to draw your attention that I believe we have next bylaws review committee on May 22nd, if I'm not mistaken.
So 3 weeks.
And the GPC is on 28th. And there is a good chance that not all items would, in terms of bylaws revisions, would be finalized and addressed on 22nd. So with that, I'm leading to a thought that perhaps this committee would potentially need to extend the mandate because it ends on June 30th, if I'm not mistaken.
Trustee McLean.
Thank you. Just so I'm understanding the ask, if we were willing to meet earlier than that, is it you need the time to get to the 22nd to do the work? Or does the date of the 22nd create a problem? Like, I'm just asking, and I'm not suggesting, but if you could be ready for the 15th or something the week earlier, and that if we could find a time to meet in there, do you have the time to do the work? And could it then make the path? Or does the time not allow?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. We actually would like a little bit more time to work on the draft. Like two
No
week,
problem.
2 week cycle is a little bit too tight for us to
Yeah,
do.
I was just
No
trying
issue.
to,
So I think what we would ask of staff is to write us a motion to go to GPC for May 28th about extending the time period in order to fulfill our requirements and responsibility. However you want to word it, if you could do that, then we support that. We want to make sure we do it well. And then potentially when we finish the work, we could have a special GPC to go to the August board. I don't know, but I might leave that. I see Trustee Art's hand up as chair of GPC. If you would like to comment, please.
I was just going to suggest, like, there were several items that the committee had to deal with that are have deadlines. So some of them have already been addressed. So there is a deadline for the mandatory attendance piece. But I think the survey produced a lot more feedback that takes a lot longer, or quite a bit longer. So I think it would be reasonable to say, for a motion to say, you know, we will bring the mandatory attendance pieces you know, before, and, you know, within whatever time is required to implement them. And that any further
Other changes, like phase the changes is what
phase
you're
the
saying.
changes.
Phase the
Because
changes.
I like, in reality, we would want this to be ready ahead of the next
September.
organizational board. Well,
Correct.
or, you know, in the fall, like,
Gotcha.
yeah.
I think staff understand the intent of that. That's really helpful. Okay, everyone, a motion. First of all, thank you, staff, very much for the work you've done to date and for the anticipated work to come. And to Lisa and Dennis in your team, Vitaly, very grateful for the work. To Denise and the IT folks and everyone else in the room. Thank you, committee, and we'll meet again in 3 weeks and see you in a half an hour for FBAC. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Motion to adjourn, Trustee McLean, seconded
King.
by Trustee King. All in favor? Thank you so much.